Hello once again. Now that we have learned how to detect collisions, we are ready to make the player interact with the boss. Today we are going to make the player hit the boss and also get hit by the boss. The first thing I suggest you to do is to take a look at the player page in the Surge script documentation. Simply open the search engine reference and then click on Player. This page has a list of properties and functions that you can use to work with the player in different ways. We will be using some of these. Alright, so we have seen that we can detect a collision between the player and the boss by means of a function called onCollision. Once a collision happens, we first get the entity that collided with the boss and then we check if it is tagged player. If it is, then we know that the collision is taking place between the boss and the player. The player variable in that function holds a player object, for sure. This means that the properties and functions listed in the player page of the Surge script documentation can be applied here. Wanna see a quick test? Let's write player.getHit. Now the player is supposed to get hit as soon as a collision takes place. Save the file and launch the engine. Now we can begin to have fun. Okay, but if the player gets hit whenever a collision takes place, there is no way to hit the boss. So let's instead check if the player is attacking. We write if player.attacking. If the player is attacking, then it means that it should hit the boss. Then we write else, meaning if the player is not attacking. If the player is not attacking, then the boss should hit the player. So we write player.getHit inside the else block. So now the player will only get hit if a collision takes place and the player is not attacking. In order to make the boss get hit, we will create a new state called hit. In it, let's change the animation to 1. This is the getting hit animation as defined in the SBR file. Once the animation finishes playing, let's change the animation back to 0. That is the flying animation, also defined in the SBR file. Let me also change the states to moving right for now. We will get back to this later. I'm also going to be playing a sound. The first thing we need to do to play a sound is to import the sound component to the script. So let's write using searchengine.audio.sound at the beginning of the script. And then let's create a sound object called hitSound. When creating the object, we need to inform which sound file we would like to load. We will load file bosshit.wav, located in the samples folder. We will play that sound as soon as the boss gets hit. Alright, so when the player hits the boss, meaning when a collision takes place and the player is attacking, we change the state to hit. And then we play the hit sounds. You can check the Surge script documentation to know more about the properties and the functions of the sound object. Let's save the file and launch the engine. Yeah, kinda works. It will get better if the player bounces as soon as the collision takes place. So let's write player.bounceback and try again. Yeah, this looks better. We do have a problem, however. Once the boss gets hit, we end up changing the states to moving right. That is not right. Instead of selecting that state, it would be better if we reverted the state of the B back to the state it was in. And how can we do that? Well, at the top of the object, we declare a new variable called previewState. We initialize it with an empty string with an empty text. Next, Just before we change the state to hit, we store the name of the current state in that new variable, previous state. Finally, instead of changing the state to moving right in state hit, we change it to previous state. Do you understand? We change the state to the previous state, the one that was active before we changed the state to hit. Okay, so let's save the file and test the script. Yeah, it looks better now, but there is another problem. Do you see? If we hit the B when it is stopped, it will continue to be stopped indefinitely. And why is that? If we take a look at the resting states, we can see that we only get out of them once a timeout of rest time, or 3 seconds, occurs. It turns out that once we change the state to hit and then back to resting left or resting right, the timer is reset. Remember that a timeout will tell you if the B stays in the same state for a certain time. That is why it doesn't work. We're now changing the state to hit and the timer is reset. There are different ways to solve this problem, but here is one way. If the boss is stopped, let's make it move as soon as it gets hit. Instead of changing the state back to the previous state, we first check if the previous state is resting left. If it is, then we change the state to moving right. On the other hand, if the previous state is resting right, we then change the state to moving left. If the previous state is neither resting left nor resting right, we then change the state to the previous state. This means that the B is moving. By the way, notice that we use equal to check if two strings are the same. A single equal performs an attribution, whereas a double equal performs a comparison. This is explained in greater detail in the Search Script crash course that is available in the documentation. This is also how it works in other languages such as C, C++, and JavaScript. Okay, so let's save the file and see what we get. So now you can see that if you hit the B and it is stopped, it starts moving immediately. That looks a lot better. However, there is one less problem. If you hit the B while it's moving, it gets out of the screen. It runs away from the battle. And why? It is because we are controlling the movement using a timeout. Once we change the state to hit, the timeout is reset. This means that we are no longer controlling the length of the movement correctly. Can you think of a solution? Anyway, this is enough for now. Today we learned how to make the boss hit the player and also get hit by the player. In addition to that, we learned how to play a sound and how to make the player bounce when hitting the boss. Later on, we will learn how to fix the movement of the B. In any case, I invite you to think of a solution right away. Can you think of a way to move the B so that the movement doesn't rely on a timeout? I'll leave you with that challenge.